more of a, okay, maybe it's too safe. All right, so today I'm behind the wheel of a Volvo S60, and we're gonna discuss some of the changes that Volvo has made for the 2022 model year. Quick disclaimer, this is not a 2022 model, but obviously the car itself is practically identical to 2022, minus the drivetrain changes, which we're gonna discuss. And yeah, so I got some thoughts on it. If you guys enjoy the video, throw it a like, and if you want to see more content like this as well as make content like this possible, please subscribe, and let's get out onto the road. All right, so first things first, as I mentioned, this is not a 2022 model, but if you're in the market for a brand new Volvo S60, the starting price is just over $39,000 for a front-wheel drive momentum trim B5 motor, which again, we're gonna get into in a second. But the same general vehicle exists. It's still an S60, it's still the same chassis, it's actually still the same exterior design, so none of that has changed. And the trims are also still consistent. So you still have a momentum trim level as your kind of basic, then you have your inscription, which is a touch above, comes with more stuff standard, and then you have your R design, which is kind of your sporty package look, kind of your M Sport, AMG line, Audi S line kind of trim. And on top of all of that, you have your Polestar engineered models, which only come on certain drivetrains. The other three, the Momentum, the Inscription, and the R Design, come on just about every drivetrain. So the trim levels are the same. They're consistent. The design is the same, but what's changed are the power plants. So previously, up until 2021, the S60 as well as the entire Volvo line came in a T5, a T6, some models even came in a T4, and all of these are 2-liter 4-cylinder engines, but they come with varying levels of horsepower. So in this particular case, this is a T6 all-wheel drive, which means that it's a 2-liter supercharged and turbocharged 4-cylinder engine producing 316 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque, all driven through an 8-speed Geartronic transmission, which is only so-so, no paddle shifters or anything, and again, all-wheel drive in this particular case. Well, that power plant is entirely gone. It's been nixed out of here. And below this, there was a T5. That has kind of continued on, but it's now called the B5, and it's now a mild hybrid. Now that just means it has like a 48-volt starter generator electric motor. It's not a real legitimate hybrid vehicle that can drive on full electric or any sort of electric range or in electric mode at all. But it means that it's meant to kind of aid the engine and giving it a little power when it needs to, and primarily assist in stop and go situations. Now that isn't actually a very bad thing. It's generally a pretty good thing. There's just some aspects of it I don't like. One is the name change. I don't think it was as necessary to change from T5 to B5. It seems almost counterintuitive because T as it is when it comes to cars seems a little more aggressive, and you're going to B, and you're also confusing people. Just make the T5 motor a mild hybrid. On top of that, getting rid of the T6 model and not making a B6, at least for the S60, I'm not a fan of, because this is kind of that nice sweet spot middle ground. Gives you a little more power and a little bit of sportiness in a car that really isn't all too sporty otherwise. It's a shame because the T6 was this kind of somewhat affordable, slightly sportier S60. Now look, I'm gonna be honest with you, no S60 is that sporty, especially compared to some of its competition, but the fact that now you have to spend the mid 60s and up, which is the starting price of the T8 plug-in model, you know, that model is still around, but again, in the mid 60s, yes, it has a combined 415 horsepower and a combined 472 pound-feet of torque, but that's combined power. That's really a plug-in, and its real strength is being able to plug in and be driven on full electric for a certain amount of range versus it being this pure sports car. And again, that's not Volvo's thing. So those aspects of Volvo getting rid of models is a disappointment. That B5 that effectively replaces this T6 in the lineup only has 260 combined horsepower and 258 combined pound-feet of torque. Now, a very little portion of that comes from the electric motor, so when I say combined in that case, it's not as dramatic as it is in the case of a T8, which is a full plug-in hybrid. But nonetheless, you're losing over 50 horsepower you're also losing about 40 pound-feet of torque, and I don't like the sound of any of that. Obviously, Volvo's entire mission is to move more and more towards electrification, and now, in fact, if you go on their website, it's electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and then other cars. So these have been demoted to other cars, which means they probably have a short-term lifespan left. I'm guessing Volvo is moving more and more, just like any other manufacturer, towards electrification, while simultaneously moving more and more towards SUVs. And that brings me to the real crux of this video, which is that, look, most people are buying SUVs, and this compact sedan segment is a dying segment. Most people who are buying any sort of sedan still are probably buying a Civic or a Camry. Well, unless they want a little bit of luxury, or they're maybe buying a Mercedes, or unless they want all-wheel drive, they're maybe buying an Audi, they want some sportiness, maybe a BMW, they want reliability, maybe a Lexus. But if you want safety, if your number one priority, what you value the most is safety, well, that is where Volvo shines. That is where this particular car, the S60 model, shines. It is Volvo's smallest sedan, believe it or not. Not that it's very small, it's longer and wider, I believe, than a 3 Series and a C-Class and an A4. So it's actually a larger compact sedan or vehicle. Kind of bridges the gap between the C-Classes and E-Classes, 3 Series and 5 Series of the world. So you're kind of getting a nice balance in that sense. But because it's Volvo's smallest sedan, and now a B5 S60 is Volvo's cheapest sedan as well, for that $40,000 to $45,000, $50,000 range, you're getting a car that does primarily focus on safety and does offer you some Scandinavian refinement if that's what you're looking for. This feels fairly luxurious. It's a good fit and finish, decent use of materials. The infotainment is all right. I think it's been improved for 2022 as well, but not dramatically so. You have, in this particular model, a good set of safety that I think is now standard. You have blind spot detection, you have adaptive cruise control, which is, again, just a nice added feature that's not typically standard in much of the German counterparts. So what you lose out on in sportiness, you gain in a little bit of price, affordability, if you want to call it that, and some features. It's a very chic car. It's just, unfortunately, a very complicated car now in the sense of branding. You don't see a lot of S60s around, and now the fact that they're changing the power plants, they're only making that more of a... Okay, maybe it's too safe. You know, it's a very safe vehicle, but it's just become a little overly complicated. Now, a couple things they've done that have further kind of annoyed me. They've gotten rid of this drive mode selector. Now, I'll admit, it's not the most intuitive selector. It's kind of a scrolling knob, and you would think, okay, I'll just scroll to the next driving mode. Well, as you scroll it, nothing happens. You have to push it, and then it brings up Eco, Comfort, and Dynamic, where then you press, oh, okay, I'm Dynamic now. I pressed it twice, and the rolling, the scrolling aspect of it was just brief. That doesn't make any sense to me. Make it a button then where I just click up and down like Audi does, or just buttons that are dedicated like BMW, or make it a scrolly knob like Mercedes, for instance, where you can just scroll into the next mode. Having it be this weird hodgepodge combination of all 2 or 3 of those doesn't make any sense to me, but I digress. It's gone. 2022, no more drive mode selector. Doesn't matter if you get a B5, if you get a T8, it's gone across the entire lineup. Again, this is a surefire sign that Volvo is moving towards electrification, in which case driving modes don't matter so much, as does, got a cop going fast, as does turning on and off regen, for instance. So as this change is happening, whether we like it or not, towards electrification, and particularly a make like Volvo that is really on the cutting edge of that. They've had almost entirely 4 cylinders now for the last 5 or so years, and even in their most powerful, over 400 horsepower vehicles, the T8 power plant in general being a great example of that. I'm not going to be surprised if, again, a model like this, just the nameplate, the S60 as it is, but certainly these internal combustion mild hybrid type motors are on their last legs. That isn't to say we're not gonna give it a big rip off the line here, because we absolutely are. We are in dynamic mode. I'm gonna put it into manual mode, and I'm gonna let it rip all the way down, shifting up, and there's 60. So, I mean, it's all right. It feels maybe like a touch slower than a BMW 330i, you know, or C300, just a touch slower than those cars. I'd imagine that was a high 6s, 0 to 60, maybe 7 seconds, 0 to 60. So it's nothing breathtaking, but it's also adequate. It's just disappointing that this power plant doesn't even exist anymore, and that if you get an S60 in 2022, you're gonna actually have less power than this particular car has. That is disappointing, because that was not breathtakingly fast, and I don't wanna have to resort to the somewhat expensive T8 model to get a decently quick, sporty, compact sedan. I'd probably rather just look elsewhere and spend my money with BMW, with Mercedes, with Audi, even with Lexus, who right now for $57,000 is offering about the polar opposite of this car in the IS 500 with a 5-liter V8. So it's just all food for thought. Obviously, again, the sedan market is dying rapidly. Who knows if it'll ever be revived, but right now I don't think the Volvo S60 is killing it. It just happens to have some Swedish or Scandinavian charm, if you will. It has the Swedish flags kind of sticking here off of the stitching on the seats, and when you look all around the car, it's pretty easy to find a bunch of airbag logos all over your pillars and on your door cards, and you really do feel safe in this vehicle. Not that you necessarily don't in its German counterparts, but you can feel that safety is of the utmost importance to Volvo. Even these funky headrests, to really ensure you don't have any whiplash and a, God forbid, rear end collision. So those kinds of things, if they matter to you, if you really do want a sedan, go with this. But I'd have to kind of end this video by saying that that XC40 I drove, that happened to be a T5, I believe, so a little less power than this, but a comparable vehicle, was superior. You know, a little more quirky, but also a little bit more, had a little more personality. I liked sitting higher up when it comes to a car like this that isn't sporty. Why sit low down? You're not gaining anything for sitting any lower. It's not like the trade-off is, oh, but this is a sporty car. So that's my kind of conclusion. Probably would stick with an SUV, and Volvo is going ever more so in that direction. The XC40, the XC60, the XC90. Now you have the C40, so you have a sportier version of that. You got the recharge models now as they're being branded. Those are the plugins. So that's the direction they want to head. And on top of all of that, you have Polestar. So I'm sure they're going to come out with some sort of compact SUV crossover vehicle to kind of bridge the gap between the elusive Polestar 1 and that more common Polestar 2. But this does bring me to a new thing that I'm doing, which is called Reo's Ranks, which are my completely subjective and subject to change opinions on how a car I'm reviewing stacks up to some of its direct competition. And when it comes to this, I'm gonna go ahead and compare it to the 330i, BMW 330i, the Mercedes-Benz C300, and I'm gonna throw in a wild card, and I'm gonna say the Lexus IS. And I'm gonna go ahead and say that the BMW 330i ranks number 1, the Lexus IS number 2, this number 3, and the C300 number 4, although there is an all new generation of C300 coming out, so little asterisk there. But yeah, so not a bad car, just a strange car. Here we go, foot all the way down, 40, 50, 60. Yeah, okay, that felt a little quicker than in manual mode, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that was a mid 6 second. 0 to 60, not too bad. But again, this power plant, it's gone. So if you can find a 2021, get it while you can. Otherwise, it's a B5 or it's T8. Extremes. But you're not getting this car for performance. You're probably getting this car for safety, fuel efficiency, and because it's kind of reasonably priced. I don't know about the T8, but the B5's in that $40,000 range. Again, I'm being repetitive. Enjoy this car or don't enjoy this car, make your own choice. But Volvo has made some interesting changes for 2022, and maybe I've added some insight. I can also link down to a Motor Trend link. I believe it's Motor Trend link down in the description box below that in writing goes through some of these changes as well. and maybe I'll get my hands on a 2022 Volvo or Polestar sooner than later and see the other side of the coin. But if you guys have enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing. New videos are dropping every single week on Fridays. Comment down below, let me know what you guys want to see, and I'll do my best to make it happen. And as always, this is Rio. Peace out.